Beloved, critically acclaimed rock artist St. Vincent is back with another album, All Born Screaming. Her last couple of albums, in my opinion, have been a bit of a step down. I've not been too keen on Mass Seduction or Daddy's Home. But the good thing about those two albums is, even though I'm not a big fan of them overall, I think they both have fantastic songs on both of them, respectively. Like, the track Down is genuinely one of my favourite St. Vincent songs of all time. I think it's a fantastic track. I did actually like what she was trying to go for on those albums, especially on Daddy's Home. I particularly thought the direction of sound was certainly in her wheelhouse. It was just the execution that didn't quite work for me. And annoyingly so, I'm never beating the allegations, but I think the main reason why those albums particularly were sunken down from her usual standards was Jack Antonoff. I'm not a hater. I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I like some of Bleach's stuff, and I like melodrama, okay? I just feel like I'm always bogging down and jumping down on Jack and beating him up when I don't really want to be doing that. But it just so happens every time he pops up on an album producing it, it's just weaker than the previous stuff the artist put out. I'm sorry. So I've accidentally become a hater, okay? But this new album is seemingly produced mostly by St. Vincent herself. She is all over the production credits on this album, and there isn't any like other names jumping in to bog down the album. There is just a St. Vincent produced record, and I've got to say, this is her best album in quite some time. I'm going to say it. She should be the new Tyler, the Creator, in the sense that she just puts her own music out there and produces it entirely herself, because she's bloody good at it. I like Self-Titled, don't get me wrong, but I think this album might be even better than that. I think this is one of her best albums to date. I really, really like the way this album kicks off with Hell Is Near, which I think is an interesting title because this track is far more subdued and far more laid back than the tracks that are about to come. And then once you kind of get into the more heavier tracks, it does kind of feel like she was setting you up to, you know, recognize that hell is on the way, which I think is quite a nice little clever touch, whether that's intentional or not. But the album does follow that pattern. But this track, her vocals are so lofty, they're so like dove-like, they're so pretty and delicate in a way that I don't think we've really heard St. Vincent quite go this like soft before. I mean, she does give us some slower ballady type tracks, Prince Johnny being a good example, but there's just something about this track that hits slightly different and just really suits her really nicely. Reckless, though, is a track where I feel like the hell is near basically approaches us, because the first leg of the track is just really eerie. It feels like tension is building. You can feel like something is about to lurk beneath the shadows and creep up on you in such an intense way. It's a really cool feeling the track gives you. I really like the way it sort of builds, but you don't really know where it's going to go. It's like a calm before the storm, like you can sense something is about to happen, and then that final minute comes and good God, it explodes, and it's just so like anxiety inducing the way it sounds. Absolutely tailor-made for a horror trailer. Like, this would work perfectly, you know, in those kind of quieter moments where something is lurking, and then once you kind of get to the intense moments, it gets to that final minute of the song. I think it just worked perfectly for that kind of setting. Get me in the industry. I don't even know what kind of job it is, a technical sound guy maybe, and I will put this in a horror trailer and I will show you guys that it works. I bet it will. But then Broken Man comes, and this is kind of where like the intensity is all kind of unleashed now, and the tracks from here on out just have a bit more of a stompier feel. This track has such a cool kind of like bass groove to it. The guitars and drums really beef up at a certain point in the song, and it sounds fantastic. It sounds like something another Jack would do, not Jack Antonoff this time, Jack White. This track really reminds me of something that would pop up on Fear of the Dawn, which is an album that I really do like, and makes me realize why I probably also really like this album as well, because they have a similar feeling throughout. Just those like buzzy guitars and the way it's produced, and there's a bit of an eclectic feel to it. Big Time Nothing, I think, might be my favorite track. Just one of the catchiest songs on the album. Again, those buzzy guitars sound great. There's a funky swag to it. I think St. Vincent sounds really, really cool on this track. Just really oozes like effortlessness cool in that sense. I think she's always had that aura to her though. But a track like this really shows that, and the backing vocals just add such a nice amount of depth to the song. I think it just sounds all so great. We were talking about prime horror trailer music earlier, but let's talk about prime James Bond theme music with Violent Times. Jesus Christ, tell me this does not sound like it could be the next theme for the next Bond film. Like, it really, really has that feeling to it, which I know I'm not the first person to point out as well, by the way. I know it's not the most original point to make, but it's a really good point to make because it just sounds perfectly it sounds perfect for that kind of film. Very much in that kind of like oddity Bjork Bachelorette realm though, like maybe a little too strange and a little too out there to be a full-on Bond theme song, but actually would be better than a few of the more recent ones, so they should bloody do it. I mean, no hate on Sam Smith or Adele, but I just think those tracks are a little plain sounding. They're not really ones I'd ever play, you know, in my own free time. It would only be if I'm watching the film, whereas this would work for the film and I'd listen to it all the time because it's friggin' great. Now, unfortunately, we do have to put a downer on the review, which is a shame because it's not all smooth sailing from start to end, as we do have to now talk about Sweetest Fruit, which, by the way, on my other socials, TikTok and Instagram, I've already talked about this track, so you should follow me over on there if you don't, because I do content over on those platforms. That doesn't always necessarily make it onto YouTube because I have already discussed this song, but for the purpose of the review, I do have to mention it again as just being a bit of a misfire, maybe a big misfire, maybe not a bit of a misfire, but rather a large misfire on the album, in that it just feels a bit odd. It's a tribute to Sophie. Unfortunately, we lost Sophie a few years ago to a really tragic accident. Sophie's a legend in the music game, has had huge influence across so many forms of pop that I think a lot of people don't even quite realize how influential Sophie was, and her sound on a lot of artists now, if you're not particularly familiar with Sophie, because I think, you know, she wasn't a mainstream, massive, recognizable name, but her influence has lived on hugely. And of course, a lot of artists look up to Sophie and appreciate what she did and viewed her as an icon. Of course, why wouldn't you? So making a tribute towards Sophie is fine and it makes sense, of course. But doing it like this just has left me scratching my head, as you can see. Look, making eulogies, making tributes to people that have passed away that meant a lot to you is a normal part of life. I've done it myself. But to think of doing that and focusing on how the person died, I just find so odd. Like, why not talk about how they impacted you or how you felt about them as an artist or a person, or just personal things about them, and not like giving us like a sort of word for word explanation of how it happened. I just find it really odd, really strange, made more so by the fact that when you look into it, apparently they never even met. So you're talking about this, about a person you never even met, and it's like, I don't get it. Even if you had met, like I say, doing a tribute for somebody or a eulogy for somebody that you knew and loved, you wouldn't talk about that, would you? I just find this whole baffling. I know it's one small portion of the album, but it really is a dour section that I just wish wasn't there, because, you know, why do I have to skip this? Like, I don't want a track that I want to skip. The rest of the song actually sounds really good. Like, the chorus I think is great, the beat is cool, it's a bit quirky, it reminds me of some like classic St. Vincent. But it's just that part of the song that I just wish you could take out. I've said this already as well, but it doesn't detract from the overall quality of the album. All great albums from any given year can have one song that you might not like, and the rest of the album's just fantastic. Like, that is the makings of a great album. Not every album out there can have songs from start to end that you absolutely love. Only like the greatest of all time, or the classic albums, or the best albums of all time can be that kind of album. But a great album from any given year can have one track you don't really care for, and that just unfortunately is this one. So it doesn't detract from the whole thing. It's just a bit of a shame. And, you know, do we need this for Sophie? It's just a shame that it's a tribute that really goes off in an awkward way. I'm sure the intentions were good and the intentions were there, and St. Vincent meant well by it, but the execution, not so good. Closing track though, All Born Screaming, is an absolute riot of a song. It starts off in a bit of an odd reggae feel, like there's a reggae undertone to the track, which I think a lot of people are aware that I've talked about white people doing reggae before, and I'm not the most forgiving towards bands like UB40 or 21 Pilots when they tried doing it. But honestly, this track particularly doesn't sound too bad. It's not really taking up the entire portion of the song, and it's only like a flavour of it kind of bleeding into the opening section of the song. Because once you get to the ending where it absolutely just goes off the rails, it sounds awesome. The beat sounds great. The vocals are really fantastic too. It's got Kate Le Bon on here. Respect Kate Le Bon. Kate Le Bon's last album was really good and underrated, by the way. So yeah, I'm all for this song. And that's the review, essentially. I feel like there's not much else to say. I think the whole album has so much to offer in the kind of quirky side of St. Vincent, or the rocking side, the buzzier side, the more menacing side. Really, really creative production throughout, just fantastic vocals. And yeah, I think overall this is great. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of warm up to this one, and people seem to be in agreement that this is a really good St. Vincent album. I know some people are a little bit underwhelmed, but I think it's lived up, to be honest. I think it's surpassed expectations, actually. And yeah, I think it is really one of the best albums of the year. 8 out of 10 from me. I really like this one. A massive return to form for her, because in my opinion, her last few haven't been that great. But this one is genuinely really, really strong. I think this is easily one of the best albums of 2024, and you should be checking it out if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, if you agree with me, disagree with me, your favourite track. And yeah, subscribe, check out my Patreon as well to support me over on there, to keep videos going, to keep this channel going. That would be amazing. You get perks on there as well. Thank you for watching. At least like the video and subscribe. That's the very least you can do. Have a good day. You've got to have a good day. And goodbye.